Thomas Midgley Jr. On November 2, 1944, 55-year-old Thomas Midgley Jr. was found dead in his bed in Worthington, Ohio. Midgley had invented both leaded gasoline and chlorofluorocarbons, chemicals that would cause immense environmental damage. He's been called the organism that did the most harm to Earth's atmosphere. Years earlier, Midgley had contracted severe poliomyelitis, leaving him paralyzed from the waist down. Confined to bed and frustrated by his dependence on others, Midgley applied his inventive mind to solving a personal problem. He designed an elaborate system of ropes and pulleys suspended above his bed to help caregivers lift and reposition him. The mechanical harness was complex, with multiple cables and counterweights. On the morning of November 2nd, something went wrong with Midgley's invention. He became entangled in the rope system. The ropes tightened around his neck. Midgley couldn't free himself or call for help. The pulley system he'd designed to assist his caregivers strangled him to death. The official cause of death was ruled as suicide, though it may have been an accident. Either way, Thomas Midgley Jr. was killed by his own invention. The man whose chemicals poisoned the atmosphere died alone, strangled by ropes and pulleys in his own bed. Alfred Nobel. On December 10, 1896, 63-year-old Alfred Nobel died at his villa in San Remo, Italy. Nobel was a Swedish chemist who'd invented dynamite and built a massive fortune from explosives manufacturing. He died from a massive cerebral hemorrhage, suffering a stroke that killed him quickly. Years before his death, Nobel had experienced a disturbing preview of his legacy. In 1888, Nobel's brother Ludwig died in Caen, France. A French newspaper made an error and published Alfred's obituary instead of his brother's. The headline read, Le Marchand de la Mort est mort, the merchant of death is dead. The article condemned Nobel as a man who became rich by finding ways to kill more people faster than ever before. Alfred Nobel was confronted with how history would remember him. The premature obituary horrified Nobel. He became obsessed with rehabilitating his reputation and leaving a different legacy. Nobel secretly rewrote his will without telling anyone. When the will was read after his death, Nobel's family was shocked. He'd left his vast fortune, worth over $250 million in today's money, to establish prizes for achievements in physics, chemistry, medicine, literature, and peace. The Nobel Peace Prize was his attempt to be remembered for something other than death. Franz Reichelt. On February 4, 1912, 33-year-old Franz Reichelt jumped from the first deck of the Eiffel Tower in Paris. Reichelt was an Austrian-born tailor who'd invented a wearable parachute suit for aviators. He'd secured permission from Parisian authorities to test his invention from the tower. Reichelt had promised officials he would use a dummy for the test, but when he arrived at the Eiffel Tower that freezing morning, he was wearing the parachute suit himself. His friends begged him to reconsider and use a mannequin instead. Reichelt refused. He wanted to personally demonstrate his invention's effectiveness. Primitive newsreel cameras were already set up to film the historic test. Reichelt climbed onto the platform 187 feet above the frozen ground. He stood on the edge for several long seconds, hesitating. Then Reichelt stepped off into empty air. The parachute suit immediately folded up against his body instead of opening. Reichelt plummeted straight down like a stone. He hit the frozen ground at terminal velocity. The impact left a 6-inch deep crater in the earth. Franz Reichelt died instantly, and the entire fatal jump was captured on film. The newsreel footage of his death remains one of the earliest examples of a fatal accident caught on camera. Thomas Andrews. On April 15, 1912, 39-year-old Thomas Andrews went down with RMS Titanic in the North Atlantic. Andrews was the ship's chief naval architect, the man who designed the supposedly unsinkable vessel. He was aboard for the maiden voyage to observe the ship's performance. When Titanic struck the iceberg at 11:40 p.m. on April 14th, Captain Smith immediately summoned Andrews. Andrews toured the damaged compartments and did the mathematical calculations. He informed the captain that Titanic had at most 2 hours before sinking. Andrews spent his final hours desperately working to save lives. He rushed through the ship, forcing reluctant passengers into lifeboats. He gave away his own life jacket to a passenger. Andrews worked tirelessly even as the ship's bow plunged deeper into the ocean. As the evacuation became chaotic, witnesses lost sight of Andrews. A steward reported seeing him one final time in the first-class smoking room. Andrews stood completely alone, staring blankly at a painting on the wall titled, "Approach to the New World." His life jacket lay discarded on a nearby table. The floor was tilting noticeably as the ship sank. Thomas Andrews apparently chose to go down with his creation, standing motionless as the freezing Atlantic water rose around him. His body was never recovered. Horace Lawson Hunley. On October 15, 1863, 39-year-old Horace Lawson Hunley drowned in Charleston Harbor, South Carolina. Hunley had invented the H.L. Hunley, the first combat submarine in naval warfare. The experimental vessel was a narrow iron tube, powered by a hand-cranked propeller. The submarine had already sunk once during testing, killing 5 crew members. Rather than abandon the project, Hunley decided to take personal command. He believed the previous crew had made operator errors that he could avoid. On October 15th, Hunley took the submarine out for a routine test dive with a 7-man crew. The vessel submerged successfully in Charleston Harbor. Then something went catastrophically wrong. The submarine took on water and sank to the harbor bottom. Trapped inside the claustrophobic iron tube, Hunley and his crew had no way to escape. The submarine settled into the mud in complete darkness. All 8 men drowned in the pitch-black interior, as water filled the confined space. When salvage crews recovered the submarine, they found Hunley's body still holding the candle he'd used for light. The H.L. Hunley was raised, repaired, and eventually became the first submarine to sink an enemy warship, but its inventor died trapped inside his own creation on the bottom of Charleston Harbor.